God's team is the best team, the greatest team, the team that lasts forever. There's only one way on, you've got to trust God's Son, then you'll be on the team forever.
Welcome to another week at Waves. This week the theme is Don't Give Up. I bet you can work out what we're going to be talking about. What are some of the things that you think might make an athlete actually give up their sport or their race? It might be that they're in pain, they've hurt themselves, twisted their ankle. They might be physically exhausted and just can't run anymore and collapse to the ground. It might be that they don't think other people are playing fair. It might be that they're losing or they're too far behind. If it's a running race, people might be a whole lap ahead of them and they just don't think they can catch up. It might actually be that they think the referee isn't doing a good enough job and therefore their team's never going to win. There's lots of things that actually make people give up their sport. I'm going to add my next person to my mural. And this time, it's an exhausted runner. And he's really tired. Let's add him on there now. Sometimes God's people feel like giving up. They say it's too hard to keep on going. They might feel alone or frightened on the race of life. They might keep making mistakes and it really just gets too hard to complete that race. And you know what? They actually get to the point that they think it'd be better off completing the race without Jesus in their life. Do you think God actually knows how we're feeling? Do you think he actually cares? Well, he does. God cares a lot about us and he knows what we're thinking before we even think it. So when we are looking like we're giving up and thinking that we're going to give up, God knows. There's one person that I'm going to put in our crowd of witnesses that actually knows the answer to all the questions that we have when we're trying to give up and whether God knows we're giving up or not. And his name's Elijah. I'm going to add him on there now. Now that Elijah's on our mural, let's hear Elijah's story. Elijah was a great prophet, a man who told the people what God wanted them to know. He was a very brave prophet because many of the messages he had to deliver were messages that King Ahab and Queen Jezebel and the people of Israel didn't want to hear. Messages like, stop worshipping the god Baal and start worshipping the true God. Elijah hated to see God's people worshipping false gods. He organised a contest between the false god Baal and the true God. Let's build some altars and make sacrifices to the gods, he said. But we won't light them. Whichever God sends down fire on his sacrifice is the true God. The people were very excited by this idea. They turned up in their thousands to watch. The priests of Baal spent hours dancing around their altar, pleading with their God to send fire. But nothing happened. Nothing at all. When it came to Elijah's turn, he even poured water all over his sacrifice. Then he asked God to send fire to show that he was the true God. Immediately, fire from heaven fell on the altar. It burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and the water. What a wonderful victory for God. All the people cried, "The Lord, he is God! The Lord, he is God!" And at Elijah's command, they killed all the priests of Baal. Now things will be different in this land, thought Elijah. Now God's people will worship him. But he was wrong. Queen Jezebel was a wicked woman who had a lot of power. She was furious when she heard what Elijah had done to the priests of Baal. "I'll get you," she roared at Elijah. "This time tomorrow, you'll be as dead as my priests." Elijah panicked. He was so scared he just took off. And he ran and he ran and he ran out into the desert until he could run no more. 192 kilometres he covered in all. That's some big panic. What might God think of Elijah's action? Do you think he would actually understand? What would you do to Elijah? Well, Elijah sank down under a tree and prayed that he might die. "I've had enough, Lord," he said. "Let me die. I've been one great big failure for you. I'm no better than all the others who've gone before me. Just let me die." And he fell asleep from exhaustion. Do you sometimes feel like an absolute failure? Do you think that God actually understands how you feel? Well, God didn't get mad at Elijah for feeling frightened and running away, or for feeling like a failure. He didn't send him back with his head bent in shame. Instead, God let Elijah have a really, really good sleep, and he even sent an angel to wake him with some freshly baked bread and water. That happened twice. God understands when his people are exhausted and they can't cope with their problems very well. Elijah kept going until he came to Mount Sinai. There he crept into a cave. Now, if you've ever crept away to be alone and then someone has said, "What are you doing here?" you'll know how Elijah felt, because that's exactly what happened to him. And it was God asking the question. So Elijah told God exactly how he was feeling. "I've tried really hard for you, Lord," he said, "but your people don't care about you. They kill all the messengers you sent. I'm the only person left who believes in you, and now they're going to kill me too." Elijah was feeling really, really sorry for himself now, and very lonely. But God understood. He didn't get mad. He just kept on loving Elijah. "Go and stand outside, Elijah," God said, "for I am about to pass by." Suddenly, a powerful wind started to tear the mountain apart, but God was not in the wind. Then there was an earthquake, but God was not in the earthquake. Then there was a fire, but God was not in the fire. Then there was a gentle whisper of a voice. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out of the cave, for he knew it was God. "I have more work for you to do, Elijah," God said to him. "I want you to go back. I'm giving you a man to follow in your footsteps, and I want you to remember that you are not alone. There are 7,000 people in Israel who are 100% behind you. They have never bowed their knees to worship Baal." What an encouragement for Elijah. 7,000 other believers all running for God like he was. And God didn't think he was a failure. He had more work for him to do. I'm sure Elijah would have headed back to Israel a much happier, more confident man. He was still a little scared of Queen Jezebel, no doubt, but he was determined to persevere for God, trusting in him to work things out. See, kids, God's always like that. He's an encourager. He encouraged Jesus when Jesus was on the cross and thinking about how hard it was to die. He encouraged Elijah, and God can encourage us too. God wants his people to persevere in the race of life so that they can have the crown that lasts forever. When God's people feel like quitting, they can always call on him in prayer and through others. He'll understand. He really is the strength that we all need in life. Let's remember that. Let's throw off sin that tangles us. Let's run with perseverance. Let's fix our eyes on Jesus. I'm going to add my new runner on there now. And he's the runner that's persevered. So I'm going to move Elijah down to our crowd of witnesses and put my new runner on. So there's our runner that was exhausted and now's persevered with the help of God. I'll see you next week. Bye.